Hello and welcome back to the Snakebite. It is our weekly sports show that airs every Wednesday at noon. I'm John Kristovich. That's James Simpson. Here's what happened this week in 𝙎𝙆 athletics.
It was another action-packed week for 𝙎athletics with most of the teams competing on the road this week. They didn't do half bad either as we look at this week's rundown of scores. Lots of W's for the Moccasins this week, including a pair of wins from both the indoor volleyball team and the women's soccer team.
Yeah, and you can't forget about the gritty effort that the men's soccer team put together this week, James, coming away with a draw and a loss. Plus, not pictured here is the women's golf team, which put together an extremely strong first-round showing at the Savannah Lakes Invitational over in McCormick, South Carolina. Let's start with that team this week.
Yeah, John, the 𝙎women's golf team was in 4th place out of 17 teams at the Invite. They posted a strong score of 297, just 4 strokes off the lead as a team. And Elizabeth Harding, the graduate student out of South Leon, Michigan, was in a tie for 2nd place individually, just 1 stroke off the lead at the end of the first round. We didn't have updated results by the time of production, so you'll need to tune into fscmocs.com to get final results from the Savannah Lakes Invitational.
And James, you remember we did an interview with Elizabeth Harding last year talking about her transfer from Michigan State, so glad to see she's off to a great start to her season so far. The Mocs are going to be back in action in a couple of weeks at the D2 Golf Week Invitational. That's one of the biggest ones in Division II, where they'll compete against some really talented teams from across the nation in Destin, Florida. On the men's side, they wound up finishing 7th at the Griffin Invitational last week. That was in St. Leo. They were led by sophomore Clay Tucker, who finished in the top 20 with a 3-over performance at the Invitational. And the men's team will be back in action against Nova Southeastern in early October.
Now, John, let's take a look at our soccer teams, and we'll start with the men who went 0-1-1 this week after tying Flagler and losing to Lynn. Henry Topovin had the only goal for the Mocs this week, as he's now got 7 goals through 7 games in his first year with Florida Southern. He had the opener against Flagler before the home team equalized, and the game finished tied 1-1. They took on Lynn University on Saturday night in a very gritty, very wet effort here at home.
Yeah, James, you could say that again. It's night and day, rain or sun, you never know. But you really did have a battle between 2 teams trying to win their first conference game of the year, and it was a really physical battle in that rain. And the teams remained scoreless despite a couple of great opportunities from both sides until the 80th minute when the Fighting Knights were awarded a penalty kick for a foul in the box, and they did convert. Our Carl Van Gelder had a chance to talk to Santiago Perez, one of the team's defenders, who actually notched 2 quality shot attempts after the game.
Tonight was a tough loss, not how you guys wanted it to go. How did the rain just affect this match today?
I really think it didn't affect us. Like to be honest with you, I think it's it's more like in the game. Like we made some mistakes at the end. There are a lot of things to improve, but the weather, honestly, it didn't affect us.
You said there's some improvements to come from this game. What are a few that for your meeting against Atlantis next week?
I would say it's really hard to tell after losing, but I would say always at the end, we had to be more focused at the end, the last minutes of the game, the last 20 minutes of the game. That was against Noah was the same. They scored with 20 minutes left, reminded in the club. Today they scored with 7 minutes like the club. I don't think that it's fitness-wise. I think that we are well prepared. It's just we have to be more focused.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And that team competed last night after our production time against Atlantis University in an exhibition match. So they returned to conference play on Saturday night at Florida Tech.
Yes, and on the women's side, they've continued their phenomenal start to the season with a pair of wins this week on the road. Let's look back at last Wednesday when they beat Ed Waters by a dominating score of 8-1. Freshmen Jasmine Adames and Molly Brost each scored twice to overwhelm the Tigers' defense, and they followed up the record-breaking win with a huge road victory against Lynn University on Saturday night, 3-0.
Yeah, James, that game against Lynn, that was a game that they wanted bad, and it showed. Great start to their season, but still looking for their first conference win, and they got it by the strength of Caitlin Lowry. She scored twice, and just great to see her back on the score sheet after another great 2021 season. Mocs are now 4-1-2 on the season as they look ahead to their next conference matchup with the Embry-Riddle Eagles tonight on the road at 7 p.m. And again, excellent week for women's soccer. The 8 goals they scored against Ed Waters was a program best, and now they're starting to get hot. 4-1-2. They look good. We'll see how they do tonight.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one, and we'll also have the women's volleyball team back in action tomorrow night as they take on the Nova Southeastern Sharks here at home. It'll be an interesting game, to say the least, with the Sharks carrying a record of 9-2, fresh off a monstrous win over the University of Tampa last week. The Mocs, though, they're 7-4 for their own right, getting back on track this past week with 3 set wins over both Florida Tech and St. Leo. Bea Formalon was named Sunshine State Conference Defensive Player of the Week for her 34 combined digs in the pair of wins.
And this is where things start to get interesting in the conference schedule, with Nova Southeastern coming off a huge win over the defending national champions, the University of Tampa, and now they come to the George Jenkins Fieldhouse. So huge game tomorrow night at home. That one's going to be fun. And it's a busy weekend elsewhere for the Mocs, as both the men's and women's tennis teams are going to be back in action at the ITA Regional Championships in Montgomery, Alabama. The men's and women's cross-country team are going to travel to St. Leo, and the women's swimming team welcomes in the University of Arkansas. Don't forget about men's ice hockey. They'll be in action against Florida Tech this Saturday night as well. So, hey, it's busy all over.
Yeah, you mentioned that swim meet. That's one you don't see very often. The Razorbacks going against the Mocs. Should be a fun one. And that brings us to our Weekend Mocs History segment. And today we're looking at September 25th, 1978, when the Florida Southern men's soccer team took down St. Leo in the first round of the SSC tournament by a final score of 9-0. It was the 22nd season for head coach Jim Bush and the very first year that the Mocs competed in the Sunshine State Conference.
Those two teams are going to go back at it for the 64th time next Saturday, and we'll talk about it more next week. John Kristovich and James Simpson saying thank you so much for tuning in to FSC TV. We will see you next Wednesday at noon.